afternoon. It's been a rollicking week at the Hive. Male Lolita Emmanuel Macron is running France. Hillary Clinton will not go quietly into the night. The Kushners are trying to cash in. James Comey sure has had a fascinating couple of days, and Evan Spiegel has another rite of passage.
That's right. Welcome to VF Hive on Cheddar. I'm your host, Kristen Scholler, and this is my co-host, John Kelly.
God save America.
Let's start with the high five. At number 5 this week is the Kushners. We learned this week that the Kushner family could potentially benefit from the renewal of a law in Trump's first major piece of legislation, which confers U.S. residency to mega-rich foreign investors. Emily Jane Fox has been covering this story, and do you think we should be surprised here?
Well, I think that all of this kind of seems a little quaint given what's gone on since this story broke earlier this week. The Kushners trying to peddle influence to foreign investors seems like small potatoes given what's going on with Russia. But I will say what happened over the weekend was that Jared Kushner's sister, Nicole, who works at the Kushner Company, is the real estate company that his family owns and runs, went over to China and peddled a program where wealthy investors can basically pay for a U.S. passport. So if they invest $500,000 in Kushner projects in New Jersey, they will likely be able to benefit from this program that the president is in support of, which allows them to get a passport in the U.S. This is problematic. In the presentation that Nicole gave, there was a slide that had President Trump on it. She brought up her brother in conversation, saying, giving a history of the Kushner companies and saying that her brother had been in charge of one project, that he no longer works there, that he's no longer at the company. The implication is that he works for the White House. Then there was a slide with President Trump on it, saying that he's one of the people who is able to influence these decisions about whether this visa program continues. Whether or not she brought up her brother is not so troubling to me. The fact that the Kushner family did not know well enough that this is not a trip that should be happening is problematic. This is not business as usual anymore. As much as they would like to be able to take advantage of these things, or as much as they just want to operate as they did before, you can't. You have someone who's in the White House. There are ethics laws. There are people who are watching them like hawks, and their lives have changed mostly to their benefit. But also it means that these kind of things are under scrutiny where they maybe wouldn't have been before.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Frank, let's go out to you in the Seattle Bureau. First of all, I've heard that Chelsea Clinton is still on your chase after your piece 2 weeks ago. Can you confirm, Tom, that you're okay and in a safe location?
I am okay. I dodged a couple of Moabs, but we're okay out here so far today.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Tom. Did anything surprise you about the way the Kushners have handled this relationship with China? Obviously, the Trump White House has sort of pivoted, and before the election, there seemed to be a sort of open-door policy with Taiwan. Now Trump and Xi seem to be bonded at the hip. Are you surprised in any way that the Kushners acted so perhaps Trumpian?
I actually was shocked by this one. Yes, I imagine that Jared. If they were grifters, you'd think that they would at least play the long game and not blow it all this early with the Kushner visa, like a couple of months in the presidency. Think long, people. Don't just start selling off, U.S. passports for $500,000 and make the entire administration look bad. Thank goodness for the Comey firing, because that really distracted from what has long been a scandal. The EB-5 visa has long been a scam to allow not even particularly rich people to buy their way to U.S. citizenship.
And of course, that presentation to those Chinese potential investors coming just shortly after the bill was signed into law on Friday. All right, Emmanuel Macron at number 4 in today's High Five. Nick Bilton wrote a controversial piece for the Hive this week about how France could survive a hacked election while America did not. So, Nick, we're going to toss it over to you here. What gives?
Well, I think it was, we all saw the news in America that the Macron's email had been hacked. It was, the big red banner on Drudge Report and breaking news on CNN and tweets all over the place. And yet in France, it was just complete silence because the French, journalists, specifically Le Monde and the TV station, said, we're not going to cover this because we know it's Russia and we know that they're trying to manipulate the election. And I saw that and I was really jealous. Our country is, prides itself on a free press, but at the same time, it goes so far. When I was researching the story, I spoke to people in France in the media, and they were saying, we don't have a Sean Hannity or a Bill O'Reilly or even an MSNBC. Everything's kind of down the middle, and I'm sure there are benefits to that, but there's a lot of cons that we get out of that in response to.
Nick, do you think there's ever going to be any sort of internet regulation in the United States that's going to be able to somehow, while controversially, protect the integrity of our electoral system?
I don't think so. I think, it's interesting. I was interviewing Bob Iger yesterday for the new podcast Inside the Hive, and we were talking specifically about media and the divide. And one of the things that he said, which I completely agree with, is that it's only going to get worse unless it just completely breaks. And I don't see it breaking anytime soon. I mean, it is broken in many respects, but you have people that, the original thought process was that the internet would make it so people would see people on the left and people on the right, and they would get all these different opinions. And all it has done is algorithms have divided us even further. And you look at Pew Research reports and so on, that they show that people only see the things they want to see, and the internet ensures that happens.
Well, we're speaking of Emmanuel Macron moments ago. We asked our reporter out in the street, what do you think about the fact that the new French president-elect has a wife who's 24 years his senior?
How do you feel about the difference in age between the new French president and his wife, who's 24 years older than he is?
I think that you shouldn't judge love just by age. Love is love. I mean, if they're in love, they're in love.
I think that it doesn't matter. They're in love.
Love don't choose ages.
If they love each other, age shouldn't matter.
Fair play to them.
Yeah.
It's not love, no. He's marrying this person for a reason that is mutually beneficial for both parties.
I don't know. I've never been in a relationship with a European before. I feel like that could be kind of hot.
Why is it okay for men to do that and not women?
I think it's because we have a sexist society.
The same age difference between Donald Trump and Melania, and that's way creepier. It's just some weird power politics going on there where I don't feel it's the same thing with Macron and his wife.
It's definitely controversial, but I think since it's a very personal matter, I don't know if we can necessarily judge it from an outside perspective.
Is it illegal in France? No, then I guess it's all right.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Number 3 on the high five is Trump's sugar daddy, Robert Mercer. Bess Levin, Mercer was just sued for allegedly racist comments by former colleague David Magerman, whom his daughter once reportedly called pond scum. Down there on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, are these the people who should be pulling the levers of our democracy?
I think it's a pretty scary idea that they are the ones in charge. So this guy, David Magerman, his lawsuit was actually for wrongful termination, which he said happened after he went to the Wall Street Journal and told them, basically, in his estimation, that Mercer is a terrible racist, according to him, allegedly. And, Mercer also has other views that are somewhat terrifying given his power over politics in America. He apparently, according to the New Yorker, has said that he doesn't think nuclear incidents are a big deal, and other interesting points of view like that. So I do think it's very scary that he has so much power.
Bess, before we go back down to you, we're going to pause for 1 second to offer a shameless book plug for Nick Bilden's new book, American Kingpin. And once again, that was a shameless book plug for Nick Bilden's new book, American Kingpin. Bess, back down to you. I got to ask you here, there's some temptation to believe that Mercer's continuing efforts to get into trouble and Rebecca Mercer's difficulty with getting along with other members of the Trump orbit make him somehow less and less valuable. Do you fear that Mercer may be retrenching and becoming less of a public person over time?
I think, maybe there's been reports that Rebecca and Bob Mercer are not super happy with Trump, but I definitely don't see them backing away from funding these alt-right candidates and alt-right publications like Breitbart. They seem really dug in there, and, they're a pretty terrifying father-daughter duo, so I don't see them, maybe publicly they'll shy away, but I think they're still going to be very powerful and influential.
Well, for this particular lawsuit, too, right, it's really only just pennies, $150,000 in damages that David is seeking. Yeah. In the grand scheme of things, it was practically nothing, right?
Yeah. One last question, Bess. What is pond scum?
Pond scum.
Pond scum, yeah.
Pond scum,
What is that?
according to Rebecca Mercer, her definition is when you call out your boss for being allegedly a racist and getting a person like Trump elected. That makes David Magerman pond scum. But funding Trump's campaign, you know, you're a great human being.
Thanks for clarifying.
You're
I was going to say, yes, glad we clarified that, Bess. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Evan Spiegel is number 2 in the high five this week. Snapchat just announced its first earnings as a public company. Not such great results. Nick, did these surprise you at all?
Not in the slightest. Once again, Wall Street just proves how completely idiotic and stupid they are. If you look at I'm serious. If you look at the first quarter results after Facebook went public, the same thing happened. You know, Wall Street doesn't understand how to value these companies. All they know how to do is look at one metric, which is MAUs or something like that. And the stock went like this. Same thing happened with Twitter. The stock fell 24%. You know, you can see that Twitter, of course, has had trouble since then, but the stock did go back up. And of course, Facebook is now worth several $100 billion. And if you look at the Snapchat results, the DAUs, the daily active users, are up, engagement is up, all these things are up, but all Wall Street knows how to do is judge it on its monthly active users, and I guarantee the stock will go back up.
But Nick, are you at all concerned about the fact that Facebook and Instagram have been able to sort of chip away at Snapchat and steal some of its thunder and some of its juice? Would that concern you if you were an investor?
No, not particularly. I think that that teenagers that are on these platforms are incredibly fickle. They always have been. I think Evan Spiegel has his faults, but the thing that I will say about him is he understands millennials better than any CEO I've ever interacted with. Way better than Mark Zuckerberg. This is why Mark Zuckerberg has had such a hard time. All these new apps that he's put out over the years have tried to compete with Snapchat have all failed because of that. And I think that, Evan, from what I understand, has a lot of different things in the works. And, I'm not usually bullish on these companies, but I do believe that Snapchat will figure it out.
Well, speaking of Evan Spiegel and Mark Zuckerberg, there was a little bit of drama on the call, right? Evan Spiegel was asked about competition from Facebook specifically. He laughed a little bit and said, look, if you're a creative company, I guess you just got to get used to the fact that other people are going to steal your ideas. And then, of course, I mean, Snapchat's still very small when we think about market cap for Facebook, but I wonder how long it's going to be able to sort of pioneer some of these millennial-focused ideas.
Well, I think that if you look at what Mark Zuckerberg is doing, he continues to copy the high level idea, which is disappearing images and photos and videos and so on and so forth, right? That's all they're copying. What Evan is looking at is he understands, and I really don't believe that either Mark Zuckerberg or Kevin Systrom of Instagram understand this. That Evan understands that the camera is going to become an actual messaging platform. It's not the fact that the photos disappear or that they look bad or whatever it is. It's the fact that cameras will become a platform by which we communicate. And I think that that's why they're putting out glasses. They have other things in the works. And that I don't think is necessarily a very easy copyable idea. The question is will Evan be able to continue to convince new people to sign up for the platform as they segue into these new devices that they're working on? And it's only a matter of time. But I have confidence that he will, actually.
Okay. All right. Well, number 1 in this week's High Five, James Comey. We all knew that Comey was going to haunt Hillary Clinton for the rest of her life, but he may actually wreck Trump's life even more. So, Tom, we're going to bring you back in. You've been covering this meltdown. Explain, get us up to speed on everything that is happening.
Oh my gosh, how can we do that? I mean, things are happening as we speak, and it's so hard to keep up with. But I mean, the bottom line is Trump fired the head of the FBI. He gave reasons that no one believes. And it happened to also be when the FBI was conducting its Russia investigation and asking for more money to do it. So that's the circumstance. Everyone, I think, thinks this is a complete disaster. And it's going to cost Trump very heavily. It's distracting from everything that he's trying to do. The tiny win that he had on healthcare is completely obliterated. And this really could accelerate into, I don't want to use the I word, but but it could accelerate into something very bad, and we may have to anticipate President Pence.
Well, Tom, we're going to come back to you in a moment, but Emily, I want to ask you, you've been reporting all week and talking to people inside the White House. What's your sense of the environment, the atmosphere? Did they predict it was going to get this ugly this quickly?
I think that they had no idea that this was going to be ugly. I think that the early reports were that they thought that Democrats were going to celebrate this, that they had been saying for months, and rightfully so, and this is true, that Democrats wanted Comey out a long time ago, and they thought that the reaction to this would be, go get him. This is what we wanted to do for a long time, and thank you for doing it. The fact that there was no one around him saying that's not what the reaction is going to be is probably one of the most troubling facts of this, that the President of the United States doesn't have a single person who's able to say to him, this is what the real reaction is going to be, and you shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, a myriad of things obviously going on and this week as well, but are we getting any sense of maybe who was in the president's ear on this particular decision?
I think this was the president's decision. I think it didn't matter what anyone else was going to say to him. He made up his mind. He was very clearly rankled by what Comey had done in recent weeks and in recent months, not supporting him on his wiretapping tweet claim, saying that he was nauseated by the fact that he came out with the Hillary stuff, or the fact that he could have influenced the election. And so Trump was upset, and when Trump gets into a tailspin, I think that there is just no one who can stop it.
Okay. All right. Well, that is it for this week's High Five. And now, in its exclusive VF video, young female business leaders offer advice to their younger selves.
Keep a journal. Time flies. Worry less. Have more fun.
Say, lighten up, Julie. Don't be such a nerd.
Worry less about what your friends think.
Don't overpluck your eyebrows, if possible.
Do not procrastinate. Stress less. Turns out, stressing out doesn't actually help.
I would tell my younger self to receive support.
And make sure that you just always stand up for who you are.
If we had a time machine and we could give ourselves advice in starting out our company, I'd say make sure to take a vacation before you start your own business.
I would tell myself to breathe. We're not saving lives.
I'd wear much more sunscreen. People want to help you. They don't expect you to know everything. They just want you to be curious and ambitious.
It would have made my life so much easier if I would have actually known protein, not carbs.
Instead of thinking about where you're going to be in 5 years, think about where you are now and being as committed to where you are now as you possibly can.
To my younger self, a small child in the backwoods of Maine, I would say, even your biggest dreams, they're better than you can ever imagine. Go for it.
Girl, just in a few years from now, you don't know where you'll be.
There is no sort of one definition of success, which I think I have proved.
I tell my younger self, have more sex.
Our generation was the AIDS generation in college. I thought that if I looked at a penis, I was going to die. And we didn't have Tinder. We didn't have Woodstock. I don't care. It's the truth. I'm just saying, if I could go back and give myself a piece of advice, it would be to have more sex.
I think mine would actually be to be kinder.
Oh God, that's so good. I say have more sex,
Right?
and you're
Because
like, be kinder.
I was just a nasty kind of arrogant, 20-something.
Well, my next guest doesn't just regularly report stories on the front page of the Washington Post. She also appears in the pages of Vogue. Ashley Parker, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great job this morning. Pretty eventful last 48 hours. Can you catch me up to speed on what's going on? We have this picture from your reporting of Trump pacing around Bedminster, New Jersey, figuring out how am I possibly going to fire James Comey. And then there are two camps inside the White House, those saying, go for it, and those saying, don't do it. Is that sort of the picture as we're led to believe it?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that when the White House, they sort of fire James Comey, and it's, sort of explosive news in a way they don't expect. As you guys mentioned earlier, they sort of thought they'd get universal plaudits for doing this. And they made it seem like this was done at the direction of the Deputy Attorney General. And what our reporting found was that and as Sarah Huckabee Sanders kind of then later said from the podium the next day as the story unfolded, was that Trump had been considering firing James Comey since basically the day he took the oath of office, and there were a number of things building that sort of grew his dismay for the director, none of which actually had to do with his handling of Hillary Clinton's emails, which the president has praised. But, you know, he was upset that Comey didn't back him up when he made his baseless claim about President Obama wiretapping his campaign offices. He was upset that Comey in his sworn Senate testimony basically admitted that, yes, the FBI is investigating, you know, possible collusion between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. He was upset in general with what he saw as Director Comey's kind of sanctimony. He thought Comey was trying to turn himself into a mavericky martyr and using the Russia probe as a reason. And so all this is building, and then, as you mentioned, yes, over the weekend at Bedminster, the president is stewing. He's getting more and more angry. This is just on the heels of Comey's most recent Senate testimony. And he comes back to the White House Monday, and he tells a small group of close aides, all right, that's it. I've made up my mind. Comey has to go.
And the people who either persuade him that Comey can go or at least kind of greenlight the decision or rubber stamp it or facilitate it, whatever you want to do, it's a group that we're learning includes Donald McGahn and Jared Kushner. Do they have any sort of thesis behind their decision, or are they placating the boss?
What's interesting is, as you mentioned, in a lot of these White House decisions, there often are these really competing factions, you know, one arguing for one side, one arguing for the other, them all leaking to the press, and then a decision getting made. But on this was a decision that President Trump wanted. A lot of people in the White House agreed with him that they didn't love Comey's handling of the Russia investigation. There were some people who sort of thought, correctly, the optics were bad, the timing was bad, it could be a bad narrative. But this was a decision that was made with very little real dissent or pushback to the president.
Now, Ashley, we've learned in the first 110 days of this administration, which seems like it's lasted for a couple of years already, that every major episode leads to some sort of either reshuffling or reformation, or the pecking order changes ever so slightly. Within the first 48 hours, it seems like the person who's on the hot seat the most is Sean Spicer. Does that square with your reporting and your analysis?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. You know, the president blamed his communications team for this. Based on our reporting, he makes a decision. He goes back to his residence to have dinner, and he does what he always does, which is turn on cable news and get increasingly agitated. And he sort of gets upset. You know, why is no one out there defending me? Why is all the cable news coverage so bad? And I should say, in the defense of the comms team, you know, this is a decision of firing an FBI director who is investigating you that was going to be tough to spin even in the best of circumstances. And he basically, our reporting shows, brought Sean Spicer, his press secretary, and Mike Dubke, his communications director, into the Oval Office basically an hour before the decision leaked out to the press. So they did not have a lot of time to spin something that you could have spent a week on and still would have been tough to do.
Right, but we have this image from your reporting, from the reporting that Maggie and Glenn have done of Spicer reading this announcement in front of the, you know, who's available in the press room at 5:40. It seems like Baghdad Bob saying everything's fine as the statue of Saddam Hussein gets pulled down from behind him. But I want to ask you about the other side in this faction, which is the Bannon-Priebus side. Why would they suggest this is a terrible idea? Is it just optics, or is there something political at play as well?
Well, for instance, we know that Bannon had long not been a fan of Director Comey, but yeah, our understanding is that the concerns they raised, they did not raise them in a significant way, and it was more an issue of, you know, this is politically bad, this is bad for optics, this is a tough time, we'll have a tough time explaining why now. There's any number of reasons that the president would be well within his rights to fire Director Comey. Probably the easiest day would have been to do it on day one, before Comey had admitted that he was investigating the Trump campaign, basically, before it turned out that Comey, by his own account to Senate Intel, had gone to the Department of Justice to request more manpower for this investigation. I mean, in Washington, optics often matter, right or wrong, as much as the substance, and the substance of this is pretty bad, but so are the optics.
Mm-hmm. Ashley, we'll get you out here on this question. I know you have a fancy lunch that you have to attend, but tell me, what are you looking for in the next 24 hours as the story unfolds? Trump may have waived his executive privilege. Comey will probably have to defend his side of whether he's spoken 3 times about whether he's not being investigated. Where's your reporting following you now?
I mean, there's so many questions. You know, one question is, going back to Sean Spicer, is Sarah Huckabee Sanders sort of auditioning for the press secretary role? What happens there? Another interesting character to follow is Keith Schiller, Trump's personal bodyguard, who basically, and sort of it feels like a scene out of The Godfather, delivered this manila envelope to FBI headquarters to fire Comey, even though, as it turns out, the White House was unaware that he was actually across the country in California. And then probably most significantly, there's the actual real legal issues of, what does this mean? Why was Jeff Sessions, who recused himself from the Russia investigation because of a conflict of interest, because he had misled the Senate under oath about his contact with the Russian ambassador, talking to the president at all about this? Why was Director Comey, if the president's assertion is correct, talking to the president about this? Who becomes the new director of the FBI? I think there's a lot of questions.
No, there sure are, and there are literally zero answers. Ashley, thank you so much. Keep up the incredible work. All right, as Trump continues his diplomatic efforts with Mexico, here is Selma Hayek to offer him some linguistic advice along the way.
¿Qué pedo? ¿Qué pedo literally means what a fart. But we use it to say, what's up? ¿Qué pedo? Next one. Aguas. Aguas literally means water, but it means be careful. Like something's about to hit you. Aguas. Estoy crudo. Estoy crudo is when you've drank a lot the night before and you are in pain. No mames. This is really naughty. The literal words mean don't suck. Hombres malos. Okay, this one is literary. It means bad man. And that's what it means, bad man. This is ando bien pedo, which is I am very fart. Again, with the fart. And it means I'm drunk. Tienes feria. Do you have a fare? But what it means is, do you have money? Me vale madres. It's not polite to say that, but it means I don't care. Like I don't give the S word. Then, ¿qué onda? This literally means what a wave. It also means what's happening. Te crees muy. You think you are so good. Like who do you think you are? You think you're so good? But we say you think you are so, and then we never finish the next one. ¿Qué estás haciendo, güey? What are you doing, Ox? This is like the F word. What it really means literally is F your wall. Never heard it until lately.
Thanks, Selma. All right, now it's time for America's favorite game, and we really do mean that. Tom, let's start with you out in the Seattle bunker. What's next for newly appointed Deputy Attorney General Hot Rod J. Rosenstein?
Well, first of all, now we all know the guy's name, and according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, he is the most respected jurist in the United States, the most impartial, most wonderful guy. So maybe he's going to ascend to great heights. I think if he were smart, he would quit now and say, I didn't know that my memo that I was writing up was going to become the basis for the firing, and that might save his reputation. Otherwise, I think he's going to be severely bruised by this.
A lot of eyes on him right now. Okay, Emily, Kellyanne Conway, right? She's still sort of flying kind of below the radar here. What's next for her?
Well, I think if there was one winner out of the Comey situation, it was Kellyanne Conway. Finally, this is all it took to get Kellyanne Conway back on primetime CNN was firing the firing the FBI director who was investigating President Trump. So she's back. Who knows how often she'll be back now as this continues to unfold, but I, for one, was very happy to see her.
Well,
back on the cable news circuit.
Christmas came a little bit early. I'm very glad for that. All right, Nick, let's go out to you. Evan Spiegel, do you think that he's going to be able to have a more successful second quarter, or do you think it really doesn't matter at all?
I think it doesn't necessarily matter. I think that he will probably have the same kind of hit. I think the stock will probably go up very slowly, or do its thing, and then he'll probably have another fall. But I think after the second quarter is when things should probably end up turning around, just from some of the reporting I've done.
All right. Well, that is it for our show today. Between Bells is up next. Radio host Charlemagne the God stops by to talk about his new book, Black Privilege: Opportunity